Welcome back, Rankers. How you going? Guess what? Apparently, organic social media traffic is dead. And that is from the man who set up and runs a Social Media Examiner, Mike Stelzner. Really smart bloke. And this is a great little podcast over at digitalmarketer.com with Keith Krantz and Molly Pittman. A really good interview. And what Mike is saying in that is, like, if you're hoping you're going to get some sort of or you're relying on organic traffic out of social media, so just by, from your Facebook page on social, from your brand page, or from your Twitter account, or your reposts on LinkedIn or on Google Plus or any of these other places, he's saying really the majority of the traffic they get, and this is Social Media Examiner, is all coming from Google Organic, which is normally the case. So to give you for instance, if we see a site where they have a lot of social media traffic but not a lot of or Google Organic traffic, that's usually an indication that they're leaving traffic on the table or money on the table. In that, this is if you've got a lot of organic traffic, you should be getting a lot of social media traffic. You should be getting a lot of organic traffic, and I'll give you an example. So this is a site I worked on a couple of years ago. This is before we started working on the site. So the blue line represents entire traffic to the site, and the orange line is just Google Organic traffic. And you can see here, back then, it made up 26% of the entire traffic, or the Google Organic traffic. And if we go to today, you can see there the numbers, that 30-day period, 2,400 all up, 642 of those were from Google. Then if I go just have a look at the last 30 days and where we're at now, and you can see here, obviously the traffic's a lot higher, but mainly that's come through Google Organic. So, nearly 14,000 a month now just from Google Organic. And I would think that 50% would actually be a little bit low for this site as well, because it relies a lot on building community in social media. So I'm not saying that building a community in social media, using social media, is not important. It is. But what Mike is saying is that, yes, go and do those things, but don't rely on the traffic to your website to come from those activities. And if you want to know, if you want to work out where you should be playing in social, and I've had a lot of these conversations recently with a couple of mates. Hi Steve, hi Sean. Steve Vallis and Sean Cullinan from Chunky Media. But they're very gung-ho on Snapchat. And Snapchat had its float this week in the US, and that's what I'm looking at here is activity for Snapchat, Twitter and Instagram in search over the last 7 days. So you can see here, this is the IPO for Snapchat. This spike up over here, that's actually the Oscars. So what that shows me is that Twitter is a pretty important medium for anything live, because that's the only one that spiked during the Oscars was Twitter. And these bumps here on Snap and on Instagram, they are all the weekends. So those social networks are more active over the weekend. So you can start to think about where you should play once you start to understand these things. Now, for Snap, the general consensus is nobody under 30 is really using it that much. It's more, so it could be an up-and-coming network. They're calling themselves now a camera company, not a social media company, where they're selling Snap glasses and those sorts of things. But yeah, it's hard to see how this is going to increase in user take-up, because of course what happened, Instagram basically nobbled them really, because they brought out the same product as what Snap did last year, and that stopped the uptake. When I go and have a look at Google though, although when I even just go and have a look at United States, I was saying this to someone, another mate this morning, and I was just saying, Twitter is still as popular as Instagram in the US, which I found surprising. And there it is there, you can see it. So, and this here is the, once again, the IPO here, and you can see Snap has stayed up a little bit since that IPO. But Twitter and Instagram are on a par in the US for usage, which that isn't everything that I hear going around. Certainly that's not the case in other countries. So it would seem that Twitter has lost ground, certainly a lot more in other countries than what they have in the US. Now, if I just put this to Australia, it gives me the graph so we can see all those again. So not as much interest in the Oscars in Australia as there was in the US. Now, when I go and add Google, so this is the volume of search. Yes, people Google. They really do. Because it's the universal search bar, so people just go and type Google in here and don't worry about the .com. Now, I found this fascinating. So obviously, yes, Google's got a lot more traffic, and guess what? Facebook's got more traffic than Google. But this is fascinating. So this is over the last 7 days, and in Australia, Google peaks at 9 a.m. Now, I'm not too sure whether, I'm assuming this is my time zone, so I'm assuming this is Australian Eastern Standard Time. But it peaks every morning at 9 a.m. And then it has another little blip about midday, and then again at 2 o'clock. But lunchtime, it has this massive drop. So lunchtime searches drop in Google, which is, I just find that sort of stuff fascinating. And if you then go and have a look at the US, it's a similar sort of thing. So it's 1 a.m. my time, which would be 9 a.m. New York time. So globally, people start their day with Google. It's just, I would not have thought that, but that's what happens. So when, I just wanted to do a headline, obviously, today to say social media was dead, because we've had so many SEO is dead headlines over the years. But it was just interesting in that, we post a lot on social media. We don't get a lot of traction with the brand stuff. I get more traction with the personal stuff. And, as far as Facebook goes, I'm certainly going to be doing a lot more Facebook Live videos. So if you're on Facebook, just send me a friend request. We'll start doing more Facebook Live next week. And I'll probably start doing this show live again and take questions as we go. And we'll see you next week. Now, make sure you follow us on Facebook and also YouTube. And we'll see you then. Thanks very much. Bye.